Okay. What was your childhood like in OOB?
Well, first of all, my mother picked this place primarily because we were very young and she was very pro-education. And she wanted to make sure we all got jobs, however young we were. My younger brother was 9, I was 10, my older brother 11, and my sister 13. We moved here in 1945 from Waterville, Maine. My dad had died in 1943, 33 years of age in Biddeford, and he died an alcoholic. So it left my mother with the 4 kids. So working and getting a good education was very important to her, and we were very successful at it.
What is your favorite memory of OOB?
I think it was when I was town manager, the town really got together after the 1978 storm. A huge storm in February, and it damaged bulkheads, wooden ones or cement ones, immensely. And so they petitioned the town to engage in what they called a dune grass management program, because we'd lost a lot of the beach, a lot of bulkheads had been damaged, a lot of cartridges had knocked off the foundations, and the pier broke in half, and a major portion of it went out to sea. So they had heard from some of the people in Agunquit that they had planted dune grass, so-called. We started talking about planting grass to protect the bulkheads and the abutting property. They thought we were crazy because they thought we were going to plant regular grass that you put in your backyard. But we got a grant, a federal grant, for $40,000, 140,000 seedlings called culms, C-U-L-M-S. And you had to have a stick about a yard, pointed, stick it in the sand along a rope that was measured the length of the stick apart, and put in a seedling. Now the seedling, the roots of the seedling went down 15 feet to the water's edge, to the bottom. That was salt water, of course. And that's why they were so successful. The prevailing wind went from Goosefair Brook, which is, beyond Ocean Park, to Scarborough and Prouts Neck in that direction. So the grasses, as they grew, it trapped the sand. And it was in '79 when we had many citizens from Old Orchard and some of our friends that we made friends of from Agunquit. And one woman from Agunquit wrote such a great story about it, we published it in our own town report. The grass since then, if you go at the end of Union Avenue or Temple Avenue, anywhere in Old Orchard where we planted that 3 miles of grass, you'll see that the grade increased upward and seaward. And it's very, very rare now that any storm would jeopardize any property beyond the bulkheads. A lot of volunteers donated their times. We got a lot of publicity on it. The federal government that gave us the grant told us it was the best program in the state of Maine.
Awesome. What do you remember about going to school here?
What did I learn about during the school here?
Yeah, what did you remember about going to school here?
I remember, well, as I indicated to you, my mother was very, very pro-education. And so I remember every single teacher, in fact. We moved here in 1945, and I had an accent, a Franco-American accent from the parochial schools in Waterville, and before that, Biddeford. So when we moved here, I was 10. The kids laughed at my accent. And the same kids that laughed at me in the 5th grade voted for me for class president when I got to be a senior. So it wasn't like the pangs of prejudice that the African Americans suffered, but there were some wisecracks about my accent. You couldn't cut it with a chainsaw. So Helen Grant, and the teachers then got about $2,500 a year, would have me on Saturday mornings hitchhike to Saco, across from Rapid Rays, on top of Key Bank. She lived there with her daughter. Gave me free English lessons. My mother worked for 35 cents an hour with 4 kids at Butler's department store. So obviously couldn't compensate her, and Mrs. Grant must have known about it. She had never asked for any money. She would give me extra work. Then in the 6th grade, I had Helen Marshall. She was very strict, but she also gave me extra work. My mother thought I was getting so much work that what was because I was misbehaving. I think it was because the teachers had talked about it. Then Deanie Davis Fitzgerald was my 7th grade teacher. And she knew physically I was a rugged kid. And in those days, we didn't have Little League for football or baseball or basketball. But I was working out on my own, and she encouraged me. She had been a great basketball player for Old Orchard Beach High School. So I would run so many miles a day, and I'd exercise every day. It benefited me as I went on. Then my 8th grade teacher, very strict teacher, was Helen Marshall. She also gave me a lot of extra work. She was very strict, but also she would ask me to talk to boys that were misbehaved. For some reason, she thought they would believe me. And she must have thought so because when I got in high school, Herbert R. being the principal, he used me as an aide as well. It might have been because I was built like a hydrant and I was in very good shape. I'd like to hope it's because I was very friendly. Those were my elementary school teachers. Loved the education.
What year did you graduate from high school?
I graduated from high school in 1954. And I enjoyed high school very much, studied very hard, was the only boy that made what they call the National Honor Society in my senior year. They have a photo in the yearbook with 4 girls and myself. Ever since then, I've been telling people, and I can prove it, that girls at a high school age are smarter than the boys. And if you want proof, this spring, read whenever high school publishes their top 10 students. I've never seen it where the boys had, say, 6 out of 4, that it would be a majority. It's usually always 7 to 3 girls or 6 to 4 girls. So I maintain that I knew what I was talking about.
Okay. What was your first job in OOB?
My first job was at 10 years of age, when we moved from Waterville, like I said. I was a bellhop at the Old Orchard House. Worked very hard. Then when I went on to high school, I was a clerk there. When I was 30 years after that, 45, that would be 30 years after, I bought the hotel because I knew I had to do more than just being town manager, because I had 4 kids to help keep the debts of college down. College then wasn't anything what it is today, but it was still pretty substantial if you had 4 going to college roughly at the same time and some going on to graduate school. So I was a bellhop. That was my first job. I got 50 cents an hour plus tips. Gave all the money to my mother.
Okay.
The bands on the pier and at the Palace Theater were famous, like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Louis Armstrong, and they couldn't find rooms when they came here to entertain us. We went on the pier, danced before them, cheered them, bragged about them, but somehow every time they came to most of the hotels, they were told the rooms were filled or all reserved. That bothered me. So when I became a legislator in the early 60s, during the height of the civil rights movement, I introduced a bill for anti-discrimination in public housing, and it passed. I had support from Jerry Talbot, who was active in the NAACP in Portland, a Republican minister up in Bangor, also helped me out get the Republican votes because at that time I was in the Democratic leadership and we were in the minority in the legislature. And it's now law today. No one can tell anyone because of his race, color, or creed that there's no room in the inn.
At your first job, what was your pay?
My pay was 50 cents an hour plus my tip when I was 10 years of age. I gave my mother the money. I did better than most of the other bellhops because I was bilingual. Remember I said they laughed about my accent? We had attracted, of course, a lot of Canadians from Quebec primarily, and Ontario, of course, and the coastal provinces in Canada. So I would get better tips from Canadians than other kids did because when I was shown their rooms and speaking to them, I spoke their language. So I did very well. So it was not a liability for me at that point. It was an asset.
And do you know what the age was that you could get a job then?
They didn't have the limit that they have now working at hotels.
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate. They must have been desperate for work also when they hired a 10-year-old. But I don't want to brag just about myself. My brother Mark, 9 years of age, sold hot dogs on the beach at the end of Staples Street. And he studied. He became a superintendent of schools. I became 65 years of public service, 15 years of record breaking as town manager. My younger brother pulled balloons out of boards, dots from balloons rather, what is now Palace Playland. He taught school for 34 years, 4 in Wiscasset, 30 in Kittery. My brother Mark, I told you, became a superintendent of schools. My sister was a chambermaid at 13 at a small hotel called the Tidewater, where the parking lot for the Brunswick Hotel is now. She wanted to go stay at Mount Mercy Academy in Waterville, where she had gone for 2 years, but she had to earn the money for it, so she was a chambermaid. She worked very hard and became the first woman president of the University of Southern Maine, Dr. Patricia R. Plant. She's the only one in our family with a PhD. Mark and I had an undergraduate and a master's, and Richard just a BA. But that's what good working does, pro-education does, and not being lazy.
What year did you move or were you /born in OOB?
1945.
How was it?
It was great. I enjoyed growing up in the orchard. Had a lot of fun.
Okay.
I'm a beach person, so I went to the beach every day in the summertime. As soon as school was out, and I had a wonderful time on the beach. Met a lot of good friends. Had a lot of good babysitters. They used to take me to the beach and take care of me. I was raised by my mother. I shouldn't tell you too much. We can keep going on and on.
It's all right.
Okay.
You can keep talking as much
Go
as you
ahead.
want.
Next question.
Have any siblings?
I do. I have a son and 2 daughters.
Okay. Did they
I
live
have a sister. I'll tell you who I have an older sister that's been wonderful. She moved away 40 years ago, but she comes every year back for the beach. And then I got married, and I have a son and 2 daughters. And I'm very fortunate that my daughter has a house in Ocean Park that I can go to all the time. In fact, I lived there for 2 years, so I still have the beach. The beach is a big part of my life.
Did they?
My mother was born in Old Orchard, and I lived here right through high school. After high school, I went off to college, and I moved to Saco. But I taught school here until 2004. So from 1967 to 2004, I was a school teacher here. In 2004, I went to London. My daughter was living in London. I went there for a little bit to help her out. And then when I came back, I went to work for Public Works in Orchard Beach, and I still do that to this day. I'm in charge of the beach.
Where did you live? Like, what street?
3rd Street, 9 3rd Street, it's right down off of Union Avenue. And it was the populace of Orchard when I grew up. Most of the kids lived around that area, and the town was about 4,500. Now it's about 8,000, so it's doubled in size since I grew up. Basketball was my key. As small as I am, I was pretty good in basketball.
What is your favorite memory of OOB?
I have a lot of them. Probably the beach. When I got out of school in June, I used to go to the beach every single day. My mother worked, and I was raised by my mother. My father worked, so I didn't see him a lot. So I went to the beach every day at a young age, and the older people, like Jeff Thompson, he's here today, and I could go on. Most of them are deceased. They became my babysitters at the beach, looked after me. So I'd stay at the beach until 4 or 5, I'd come home, and it was great.
But what did you do at the beach? Like, did you swim or like did you play like?
Well, at the beach, I did everything. We played chase. What do you do at the beach? Volleyball. I learned to swim at the beach because the lifeguards back in the day had rowboats. And a lifeguard took me out in a rowboat one day. It was nice and calm, and he thought I was ready to swim. And he took me out just over my head, and he threw me out of the boat because he was right there, so I wasn't going to drown. And he made me swim to shore. So that's how I learned to swim. Most people in Orchard don't know how to swim, by the way.
Oh.
Believe it or not, that's something that you should. I was a big believer that every school system should have a swimming pool, and every person should know how to swim. That's a life skill. But in my class, most people didn't know how to swim, and that's kind of sad. When I grew up in Orchard Beach, right on the coastline, you don't know how to swim. So maybe you should ask some of your classmates when you go back to class, how many of us can swim? Because believe it or not, everybody assumes you can swim, and that's a skill that has to be taught to you. That's why we should have swimming in school. You can't lose that skill. Once you learn it, it's for life.
Did you go through the OOB school system?
I did, and I had a wonderful time. I was good in sports, so a lot of people followed me. I was lucky. I came, like I say, I was raised by my mother. She did a great job, but she worked. So I had a lot of free time, and sometimes free time was, most of it was good time. But I had to keep myself on a straight line. I didn't get off that straight line and end up doing some things you shouldn't be doing. But I was fortunate. I had some good people looking after me, especially teachers. I had some great teachers.
And I heard that this was the high school one time.
This used to be a high school. It was a high school. This school was opened in 1935, and it was a high school through 1980. The present high school opened in 1980, January of 1980. So this was the high school. Before it was a high school, it was a farm. So they tore down the farm, built a school, and it opened in 36. And I was very fortunate that I had the principal in 1936, retired when I was a senior in high school. Interesting little thing. Most people don't get that.
What do you remember about going to school here?
Great. We were all tight. We knew everybody. Everybody helped each other out. Going to a small school was beneficial for me. And
And how was the food here?
The lunch program didn't start until, let me see, I was like in the 5th grade. And I used to wash dishes so I could eat. I came from a very poor family. So they started the program here. A lady came in and cooked all the food, so all the food was homemade. We had it terrific. And so I used to do all the dishes for the other classes so I could get so I could eat. I could get a free meal. Not a free meal, I worked for it. So I had a job early. Learned responsibilities. Learned how to eat the right food too.
What year did you graduate from high school?
It's 1963.
And how was that experience?
Great. My classmates were great. My graduating class was like 59, and we're still close today, most of us. And there was not too many negative things going on. Most of it was positive. Most of us stayed real close to one another. The ones that stayed around. I'm still in touch with a lot of them.
That's great. How much did your first job? What was your first job in OOB?
Teaching school. I signed a contract to teach school for $4,200 in 1967.
But how was your teaching experience?
Great. I always wanted to become a teacher. I wanted to give back what the teachers gave me.
And did you teach a specific subject?
I taught everything when I first started, from spelling to reading to history to science. And then right after that, they went to departmentalized, and I became a history teacher.
How much was your pay?
I think I took home $62 a week. Which back in the day was okay. I could survive. Prices were low, so not much money. But like I say, it was a living. You could live by it. Today you need much, much more. Teachers are way underpaid today.
What other jobs did you have in town?
None. I went from college to teaching, and in the summertime I worked for Public Works, and then I coached sports here for a number of years. I started coaching in '67, football and basketball, and I coached till '82 football and '84 basketball. And then I had my kids, and I wanted to see them grow up, and I stopped coaching.
Were the equipment, was it like different from today?
Everything's different today.
Oh boy.
The kids here were dedicated in their sports. There wasn't much to do here. So if you didn't play sports, you were in the band. You were limited in activities in a small town, which you could do. So what they did was good.
Were you in band?
I was not. I wish I was, but I wasn't. Now I wish I was, but back then I was really busy with sports. I played sports year-round. From Little League, we were the New England champions. I was pretty successful, so sports was my whole life until I got out of college. Even when I got out of college, sports, that was important. That's why I went into coaching. But the most important part that you can understand is I learned all this in school from my teachers. So I had some mentors that took good care of me. They watched what I did outside. They watched what I did on weekends. And it was like moms and dads, more than one. It was great.
Sir.
He's the next student. He's 70.
You got a daughter on the police force, huh? Or is it?
I have a daughter, yes. She just had a baby. So
Oh, really?
yeah.
So you're basically, you probably have Brampton before that.
The air raid drills on Friday nights. And an air raid drill was the fire department rang a loud siren that went all over town. And everybody at that time was supposed to pull their shades down and stand. And it started at 9 o'clock on Fridays. And then in school, we had air raid drills that we had to get under our desk and cover up in case we were being attacked.
But what was that? What was like? Oh my God, I'm sorry. What was that like?
I didn't think, I thought it was fun. You know, you didn't understand the war back then, or didn't at that time. And so I used to get on the beach at night, and there were armed forces patrolling the beach, and to protect the people here after the war. So the good years started when I was born. So I was born, the war ended in 45. I was born in 45, and those were the good years. And we've continued with those good years since then. So my generation was the first start of really not going through a hard time. We all survived, and we all had a pair of shoes. They might have not been new, but we all had a pair of shoes. And we all enjoyed, I think, the process or our life at that time. It wasn't like it is today. I never had a new bike.
Are there any stories about the history of Old Orchard Beach that you experienced?
No, I could tell you 100. We could be here forever. All the stories that I experienced here. But the biggest one was I went away with good attitude, and I had my future in mind. You know, they set the stage for me. It was good. It was great. Old Orchard was great to me. No thanks.
You can share as much as you want, like a lot of experiences.
Oh, geez, I had all kinds of good things in Old Orchard. I used to go swimming in the pond. Do you know where Paradise Park is? It's up where Saco Bedford Savings Bank is downtown. If you go up that street, that's a campground. Well, when I grew up, it was an ice house. So we didn't have refrigerators when I grew up. I didn't get a refrigerator until I was in the 6th grade. And the television until I was in the 7th grade. So we used to go, if I wasn't at the beach swimming, I'd be swimming at Milliken Mills Pond. You know where that is?
I do know what that is.
We used to swim there. We used to swim at the ice house. They used to cut ice in the wintertime and store it in these big sheds and sell it in the summertime around the houses. And that was a big treat for us when the ice truck came by. In the summertime, they'd come out and they'd ask your parents how many blocks do you want, what size blocks, and then they'd have a pickaxe and chop it off the truck. And the pieces that fell, we'd run it. That was like ice cream. Wow. That was a treat growing up. That was a big thing around town. But I played Little League, like I say, all the sports. The town always provided movies on weekends for us too. That was great because I grew up with the radio, listening to the radio. So on Saturdays, we used to go to the town hall, and on Sundays we used to go next to the Catholic Church. The Knights of Columbus had movies, so we could go free and watch the movies Saturday and Sunday, so that was great.
What type of movies did they have?
Yeah, okay, you know, what do you say? The Three Stooges, they had, going way back in time, silent movies, just went to talking movies, and The Lone Ranger, Roy Rogers, those were the type of movies that were being played. They were interesting, we had a good time, it was a place to go, it was a safe place, and I think everybody enjoyed themselves. And nobody was left out. If you wanted to go, you could go. If you didn't want to go, you didn't have to.
What are some things in OOB that drastically changed throughout your time living here?
Oh, the beach was big hotels, great big hotels when I was a kid. And there used to be 2 railroad tracks and 2 trains coming every half hour from Boston. And so everybody came from Boston and stayed at the hotels. They were huge, great big ones. And in the 50s, they started tearing the hotels down and building motels. So the big changes, and now they're going to condominiums. So. And now they stopped that because it stopped the view of the beach for a lot of people. So they started building condos. After the hotels they tore them down, they built motels, and now they're all going to condominiums. And the high rises they built in the 1980s, and they put a moratorium on them because they blocked the view of the ocean. So there hasn't been one built here since like in the 80s.
Have you been affected by it in any way?
Well, you hate to see. Not really. I mean, you gotta accept change. I'm glad to see they stopped building them at the time, but we've run out of land in the orchard. So if you want to survive here, I guess you have to go up. So I can see in the future buildings getting taller, and the land has all been used. The street right out here, the current high school was a farm when I was in school. And the police department and the fire department was a farm. So we used to come to school in 2 farms. They had horses, cows, and the road right out here wasn't open. It used to be just a dirt road until 1959.
Oh.
So they used to close the show down, and this was it. It was the walk to school.
How was the ballpark?
The ballpark was built in '84, so that was just woods when I was a youngster. And in '84 it was built, and I think the politics in town, we lost the team after a few years, and it moved to Philadelphia or Pennsylvania. It's still there to this day.
Wow.
So the ballpark was nothing but big pine trees, and there was no houses. Houses were very limited, so population in Orchard, like I said, was between 2,500, this is year-round, and about 4,500. So today it's about 85 to 9,000. So it's more than doubled, but a lot of people now are building houses here, 6 months here and 6 months away in warmer climates. But we couldn't do that back in my day. We didn't have that kind of money, and people didn't do that. Well, Orchard was a super huge tourist area in the 50s, a lot bigger than it is now, because other places have developed. So when I was going to school, the summertime, in July and August, the population used to go way over 100,000, and today it doesn't come close to that. I saw some things that you haven't experienced. Big city living for like 4 or 5 weeks, and then it would go back to really tiny. So I got to see a lot of stars. We had the best performers in the world here when I grew up. And if it was today, it would be all the rock stars would be here. So when I was growing up, I saw all the big bands. They had big entertainment on the pier,
Yeah.
and you know where the Palace Playland is today?
Yeah.
That was a big dance hall too. And that came tumbling down, they tore it down in the early 60s. So when I became a teenager, dances were big. We didn't have videos and we didn't stay secluded. Everybody went to a dance on a weekend. And we had the big opportunity to see all the stars. So when I was, by the time I was off to college, I had seen more stars than most people see in a lifetime. I was lucky, right in the orchard. They always used to come here and perform Saturday and Sunday nights, Friday and Saturday nights. It was a great place to grow up. And like I said, you were exposed to a small setting in the summertime, boom, great big setting, city type living. You met all kinds of kids and girls from Canada, all over the United States. And I don't know if you can do that today. I come from Massachusetts, maybe New Hampshire, and New England, but we get a lot from Canada. It was fun. I enjoyed it watching. That's why I stayed here.
Have you been a witness or a victim of a catastrophic event in OOB, and has it affected you in any way?
No, I don't think there's, yeah, maybe. I'll tell you a sad story that happened to me. I was in the 3rd grade, and there was a fire in the orchard. And it's probably been the worst fire ever, even to this day. And 5 little kids perished in it. And it was like 3 houses from mine. And that was an eye-opener. The oldest boy was my best friend. He was in the 3rd grade. And that makes you think a little bit. But the community rallied, and they built a house for the burnt out the parents. So all the kids died in the fire, passed away. It was sad. But the community got together and built a brand new house for Mom and Dad, which was great. And that was a orchard typically. They would rally to most, and I think it's still that way today.
How was like the pier? Like, did that affect you?
The pier was great. I used to go out in the pier all the time as a young kid. I grew up on the streets. I don't know if that's a term you're familiar with, but my mother worked, father worked, so nobody looked over my activities. So I'd come home from school and be out on the street for a lot of times. Sometimes that turned into a negative by a lot of people that thought I should have been home, but it is what it is.
So that fire on the pier must have affected you.
Well, the fire in the pier, this was, the pier came down with a storm. They didn't maintain it. So what happened to the pier was, over the years, the pier has a long history. We had a steel pier, a long pier, but the weather always destroyed the pier. So when I grew up, it was a wooden pier. They had dances on the end of it. And eventually they didn't maintain it, and the weather got to it. And in 1968, the end of it, we had a big storm and it blew the end right off. So this pier was built in the 70s. And I haven't had much, I've been on this pier maybe once. So the pier was, the pier was a major attraction. It still is, but it's nothing like it was. It used to attract people, the big bands. So if you went to a Bon Jovi concert, all those stars were on the pier every week. So everybody went to the pier to see that, or dance to that music. no longer do we have that. So you guys have to go to concerts to experience that in your lifetime. You don't see it at a young age. I saw it when I was young. By the time I was 12, I saw all the stars. I was lucky.
What made you want to stay in OOB as an adult?
Because of education. I had particularly two teachers that took me under their wing and guided me to becoming a teacher. And I wanted to come back to Loranger and give to the community back what they gave me. So I did. And I did it for 38 years, till the time came when I retired, that's all, not teaching. So this was a high school, in 1967, my junior high burnt down. I don't know if you know the history of that. It's your parking lot now. That was the school that burnt in 67. And in 68 and 69, they had double sessions here in this building, the high school and the middle school, until they built the Loranger School. So I started teaching the first year when Loranger School was built. That used to be our playground back in the day. The Jameson, I was the first class in the Jameson in 1955. I went to school on School Street. You know where that is?
No.
Across from Rite Aid. And now it's a retirement or assisted living place. I went there to the 4th grade. And then they built the Jameson. I went to the Jameson in the 5th grade. And then the middle school, it was a junior high then, where your parking lot is, to the 8th grade, and then to this building. And then I never taught in high school because I was a middle school teacher. I taught here right in this building until 2004.
What grade did you teach?
Taught all grades, but I basically ended up teaching the 7th grade. And I taught a course called Global Enlightenment. It was the history course. So I enjoyed it. It was, computers started coming in. We started using computers. And it was good. I'd still be teaching if they paid me, but they didn't pay me enough. No, I was eligible to retire, so I did.
What was one of your favorite things to do in OOB? What was your favorite thing to do in OOB?
I always played sports, so I played sports year-round. So I generally played basketball. When I got to high school, I played basketball every day. So sports was a big thing. I played baseball up until high school, but basketball took over my life for like 4 years. So if I wasn't in school, I was playing basketball somewhere.
Do you have a favorite thing to do in OOB now?
Beach. Back to the beach. I gotta watch myself because I've come down with melanoma, which is too much sunlight. When I was growing up, they didn't have sunblock or sunscreen, so it affected me. I got it probably at your age, but it didn't come out in my body until later in life. So I go to a dermatologist once a year, and he fixes me up, keeps me honest. But if you go in the sun, I need some block every day. But I went, like I say, I was a beach bum. When I say bum, I mean I just went to the beach and enjoyed myself with the other kids that were down there and the other adults that were down there.
What was your favorite place to hang out? Why?
There were a lot of places in the Loranger that the kids could go after school. Cafe 64, do You know where that is?
Yeah.
Right down here in South Quad. That used to be a little restaurant that all the kids from school that didn't have an activity to go to would get down there and play records. We always used to get down there and have a great time. And there was one on Union Avenue, so after school we always had a place to go, all the kids, to hang out and listen to music and socialize. That's no longer. So I thought that was an important thing that's disappeared. We have so many activities to do today that I never had. So when I was in school, we just had, for sports, we only had, if you call band a sport, we had baseball, football, and very limited. So
Do you guys have like track?
this was the track team when I was in high school. The basketball coach used to go around and pick people. We have a track meet today. Do you want to run? Do you want to run? And if you wanted to run, you raise your hand and get in. You went to the track meet. So we didn't have any team or any practice, but the athletes all participated.
Did you participate?
I did. I ran track. I was pretty quick, so I ran the short races. And funny because in life, when I turned 40 and got out of coaching, I turned into a runner. I ran for 25 years, all kinds of races. So track helped me out.
Were there any big landmarks that people may not know about today?
All kinds, but we're all gone. So, Orchard we have like 13 cemeteries in Orchard, small ones, but they're all privatized today and nobody knows about them.
And I know that there's one in Loranger.
Wild Lake has one. There's one right behind the bank. If you get down there, on Adelaide Road, there's a gated one. But Orchard's changed so much, like I say, from two farms to a new high school, no more farms, and a fire station, police station. The fire station, police station used to be in the town hall on the top of Main Street, believe it or not. That's changed. The post office used to be right next door, the building next door when I grew up. And we had 3 movie theaters, 3 bowling alleys. And we had a ton of stuff that they don't have anymore because it either wasn't feasible or they sold out to somebody and they put something else in there. There was so much to do in the summertime in the Orchard back when I grew up that you didn't have time to. I mean, you wanted to do something, you could do anything. Go to the movies, go bowling, play miniature golf. That was all available. And today it's all commercialized. There's not all that much to do anymore in the Orchard. There's not a movie theater.
No.
And we had some great ones. The amusements were amusing. They were really good. Today, they're very limited. But that period of time has all gone by. And I think Funtown's probably the place that most people go today. But I'm surprised we still have the amusement area. So most of the big famous places, we had a beautiful train station. Now it's a parking lot. Things change. I think they change for a reason. I get worried about Old Orchard now because it's shrinking. It's a very small area-wise community, so it can only get so big, and then it has to stop. And I think we reached its peak. School system is awful small. The graduating class is the same as mine, and I graduated in '63. So the class of 2019 in the Orchard's the same size as mine was. So the school is shrinking. And why? Economics. It's pretty expensive to live in Orchard. Taxes are high. A lot of people retire and come here, build a house, and stay 6 months and go to Florida 6 months. Unfortunately, I hate to see that. But it's happening, so what do we do to stop it? You guys are going to solve that problem. Right? When you get out, you'll solve the problem. But Orchard's been great for me. I've had a great career. I worked no other place but Orchard. So I grew up here. I worked here. My summer job, I did work at the IGA for 25 years in the summertime before. That was my summer job before I went to work for Public Works. Then I went to work for Public Works and been there ever since. I retired from work, went to Europe for a little bit, came back here, they offered me a job. Now I run a excavator, a loader. So I went from a classroom desk to a worker, a laborer. I enjoy it.
What did the pier look like when you were growing up?
Oh, the pier was beautiful, I thought. As you walked up it, you had the Noah's Ark. It was beautiful. It was built in the 20s and 30s, and it was built for entertainment. So you could walk up the pier, and first thing you got was popcorn, and there were all kinds of food concessions. Today it's turned into commercialized. Most of them are alcoholic places or where they sell alcohol and entertain. And when I was a kid, they had all kinds of games. It was great for young kids. You could play ringers, get prizes. There was all kinds of things right up there. To me, that's all gone today. So. And that's the amusement business. You know, it's like anything else, but watch it's changed that way. I find it not enough family entertainment. I'll put it that way.
Wasn't the pier longer?
No, well, after, the pier was a little bit longer than it is today, but that storm in '67 it wasn't safe. And in the mid-'60s, because they didn't maintain it, it became very unsafe. And in the '60s, it just moved down. Yeah, it's a lot shorter now than it was. But if you don't maintain it every year, it's going to end up again the same way.
Do you miss being a kid?
Good question. I try to change with times. My family, they keep me young, I guess. I have a cell phone, YouTube, I can manage what I have to. I didn't distance myself. As time changed, I changed. I was a big believer in MTV when I was teaching. And do you know what that was?
I do.
You do? Well, that was a station that I learned a lot off of through the students. And a lot of parents wouldn't let their kids watch MTV. Music educates you. And it's educational, I think, in most cases. There's some negatives, positives. And so MTV started when I was teaching, and I used to play music to test in my class. I thought that was a tremendous asset. You can listen to the music, and if it bothered you taking a test, we can go in another room and just be quiet. So I thought that was one of my positive things that I think a lot of kids enjoy. Music's part of my life.
I like music too.
Yeah, you gotta have music, right?
Yeah.
Music makes the world go round.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
I could have you guys here for 2 weeks or 2 years telling you all the good things I did in Orchard. I had a great upbringing. great friends and a good education, like I said. I now run a nonprofit organization that I started 24 years ago, and we give $13,000 a year to graduating seniors. I work hard at that. So every year I work at raising money so I can give it, or my group can give it to graduating seniors to help them out in life, get them started. And it's been a great thing that I've really cherished. Our group has given over $100,000 since I started it to graduating seniors. Maybe you two guys will get some money when you graduate through hard work and graduating a lot of But Orchard's a good place to live. It's small, unique. Bigness is not better. I found this a small, good communication community is the way to go. But I also like the big cities. I like to visit big cities, but it's not my type of life that I choose to live in. And all over the world, I've been fortunate that I had a son that worked in California for years, a daughter that lived in Europe, so I got to travel back and forth for a long time. It's been a great experience. Well, Orchard Beach is special. Always will be special. It's my hometown. Even though I don't live there. Anything else?
Nope.
You guys have been great.
Question is, what year did you move, or were you born in OOB? What year?
I was born in Biddeford in 1939, 80 years ago. And my mom and daddy brought me back to the house that I still live in all those years ago.
All right. Question 2. Did you have any siblings? If so, did they live in town?
Yes, I had 4 siblings, my brother Joe Mocazel, my sister Evelyn Mocazel, my sister Beverly Mocazel. Each and every one of them lived in the same house that I live in 80 years ago. But because they're older, they have all gone to heaven.
All right. Question 3. Where do you live now?
I live at 2 School Street. They changed my number from 3 to 2 in order to make emergencies be able to find us easier by having the correct number at 2 School Street in Old Orchard Beach.
All right. Question 4. What was your childhood like in OOB?
It was totally magnificent. We played outdoors with all our friends. We didn't have television or any of those fancy things when I was a kid, so we depended on all our friends in the neighborhood. And there were many, many kids that are still here today. What else can I tell you about? All I know is it was the best place I ever thought I could live. And now that I'm older, I know it was the best place that I could ever live.
All right. So, question 7. What year did you graduate from high school?
1957. June 13th, I think it was, because it was my girlfriend's birthday.
May I ask, do you recall like your childhood dreams when you were like in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade?
I don't really recall anything. I knew that I wanted to become a school teacher, and when I graduated from high school, I did go to the University of Maine, but I didn't stay long enough to get a degree. We had a small tragedy in my family that I felt I needed to be home with my mother. my father and my brother. My father was happy that I was home because he didn't like me being gone. He was a spoiled kid. My brother was really angry because he said I was stupid not to take advantage of college, which was very stupid because had I graduated, from college, that's something no one can ever take away from you. You have it all your life, that learning. So I have a regret that I didn't become the phys ed teacher or the history teacher that I wanted. But I still am happy with my life as it turned out.
All right, question 6. Did you grow through the OOB school system?
Yes, I did.
Did you start in Jameson and end in the high school?
When I started, we didn't have a name for the school, and it was only called kindergarten. It was located on School Street. We started our baby grade there, and then we moved up to the federal school when we got to be in the 5th grade. And that was part of the war had been over, and the town bought the buildings that they had used during the war, and they turned it into a middle type school for us, but it was called Federal, and I suppose they got that name because it was purchased from the federal government. And many of the local men worked hard as carpenters to turn it into a school building. So I spent grade 5 there with a wonderful teacher named Mrs. Grant until I turned to the 7th grade. But in the meantime, we had a wonderful teacher named Helen Marshall, and she was the principal of that school. She was phenomenal in teaching us poetry, correct English, math, everything. And after the 7th grade, we turned into this part of the school, which is now Loranger, but it was called just the junior high school. And we finished our 8th grade in that school with a principal named Mrs. Catherine Nielsen. From there, we went into the high school, of course, because we became freshmen, and we stayed there until we were seniors. All of those schools have new names now. We simply call them federal school, junior high, and high school. But we had an awful lot of fun. We had basketball teams. Girls had basketball teams as well as the boys. We didn't have football, but we had hockey, field hockey games. We had baseball games, softball, because we were girls. It was just wonderful.
May I ask? All right, question 5. What was your favorite childhood experience in OOB?
I don't know how to answer that. There were so many experiences. I think it was just, we were a small town, and it's going to be a general answer because everybody knew everybody. We even knew everyone's dog's name. It was, now that I'm old, I can say, and I look back on those years, it was an exhilarating experience. It was perfect, if you could imagine something like that. We had friends, we had families, we had closeness with each other. And every experience as I look back on it, but it's hard for me to recollect them right now because I'm not really thinking about that. I'm thinking about how smart all you kids are. And
Question 8. What was your first job in OOB, and how much was the pay?
well, probably you kids might think it was too young to work. But my dad had a store, a baby wear store in Portland, Maine. And I was only in the 3rd grade when he'd take me to help him on Saturdays because there was no school. I didn't really get paid. But when I got to be about 12, I worked because my life was intertwined with people that were very much like family to me. And this was a man who came from New York and who rented one of the stores in a building that my dad owned on Old Orchard Street. And he was like a second father to me, and he took me to work in the summertime. And believe it or not, I made $15 a week, but I worked 7 days a week. But as a treat, after work at night, he'd take me up to a place called Sunnyside Restaurant on Old Orchard Street, and he'd buy me a piece of apple pie before I went home. Blueberry pie, not apple. So I can't really tell you, but we worked. I think my dad only earned $50 a week, and he was a grown man with 4 children. So the pay wasn't very much those days, but nothing cost as much as it costs these days.
Question 9. This is an important question, but did you live in OOB during World War II?
I was born in 1939, as I told you, so the war was almost coming to an end in the 41st year, and when we had parades because there was a war on, we used to save tin, oh, I didn't, but my mom did, tin cans, because they needed the tin for the army. And you know what we used to do? We used to take Mom's tin cans that she was saving to give to whoever needed them. We'd put our foot in the middle of those cans and make them wrap around, and that's what we used to make noise on the sidewalk at a parade. It was fun. Those are the fun things we did. We didn't know about war because we were too little, but we knew there was a war because you heard your parents say, well, we can't get any butter, we can't get any this because there's a shortage of it.
All right. Question 10. Are there any stories about the history of Old Orchard Beach that you experienced that you would like to share with us?
There's so many stories about Old Orchard Beach and the history. I don't have an answer right off. If we were talking generally, probably I could come up with lots and lots of them.
It's more just like a general thing, like our history about it. And
Well, you must know the history. We were founded and we were part of Saco. Is that what you mean? Things like that? That Old Orchard was part of Saco and we broke away from Saco and became Old Orchard Beach in 1883, I believe. So we used to have celebrations on our times of many years of being a town. How else can I tell you?
more just like any great things that happened around your time when you were.
Well, I know I was too little to go, but we had the biggest bands in the country that played music and orchestra bands on our pier at the very end. And again, I was too young, but once I got a little older, sometimes with friends, we'd try to walk out there and look in the windows, but we weren't tall enough to even see what was going on. But that was something, remembering all the cars that were big and beautiful when they were in town, going, oh my goodness, maybe we'll be rich enough to have a beautiful car like that. That was kind of the stuff we thought about, I think.
May I ask, what was I gonna say? Oh yes. Do you you were older, of course. Do you remember if you did any bands that you went to see? If you did.
No, honey, because by the time I got old enough to be able to go out late at night and go to band shows, the big band era, as we called it, and Old Orchard was famous for that. They were gone. They had gone to other places, and
I guess you did kind of hear the music when
we heard the music and we enjoyed every bit of it, but we were too little to peek in the windows there. But it was a time, and everybody in town was talking about the show that was here, Duke Ellington or whoever he was with. But it was a marvelous time for Old Orchard Beach. And from what I understand, of course I wasn't there to witness any of it, everybody raved about it. And then we had a big fire. I'm sure you've heard of that. Again, it's only hearsay from my own parents to tell me about a massive fire that was tragic to Old Orchard, and that happened in 1907. But I wasn't born until 32 years after that, so all I can tell you is I know about it, but I wasn't there.
Question 11. Have you been a witness or a victim of any bad events in OOB, and how did this affect you in any way?
No, I had a very lucky childhood, but I told you about the 1907 fire, but there was another fire, and it was sometime in the 60s, and I was still kind of young. The whole arcade burned up, and I was down there with a doll baby carriage with my doll in it, when a school teacher, Mrs. Margoni, who was not born here but was a lifelong resident here, she was a 4th grade teacher also, she was there, and she came and grabbed me and my doll carriage and took me out of there. And it's a good thing because I might have been very badly injured. The big slide that was over on East Grand Avenue, it was way up in the sky, and you'd come way, way down on a mat, and it would be over in 2 minutes because it went so fast. But no one ever got hurt or anything like that. It was all, well, bumper cars. Oh, the rides were wonderful. And of course, we couldn't go to them too much. The tourists used them because it cost money, and no one had any money those days.
All right, question 14. What did the pier look like when you were growing up? Did it change a lot?
It's more than half shortened. I don't go on the pier as much because it's not quite the same now as it used to be. The pier French fries were famous. You probably have them. They're in a different location now. It was just, I told you, twice as long. Can you imagine how big that was? And the people there came back year after year, so you knew them. As you went up on the plank, there was, on the left-hand side, there was a merry-go-rounds that you couldn't help, no matter what age you were, to not dance your feet to the music of that merry-go-round. And when they finally sold it, it was so worth so much money, they took it off to a place in Ohio, and I think it might still be in existence there. We lost it here. There was the donkeys live donkeys were next to Noah's Ark. That was high up in the air. That looked like the Ark in the Bible with the head sticking out of giraffes and lions, and that would play music, and the donkeys would take you down into the tunnels, and everything about Old Orchard was, I think, in my opinion, wonderful.
This is just a follow-up question because you brought up the Noah's Ark. Did you ever go on that ride?
I did, and I used to be scared too.
What is it like? Is it a roller coaster?
No, it was like an ark, a big boat. You went indoors, and there was closed doors, and things would pop out at you, and you'd scream and holler because you were scared. It was just wonderful. And on the other side, we had a whale that had a big mouth. And where Palace Playland is, we had the room of mirrors, and every which way you go, it was a maze. And everywhere you'd go, you'd just see your face, and you didn't know how to get out, and you turned the other way, you'd see your face again. But there was really a route that you could take. We had swan boats over on the Palace Playland side. Roller skating rinks we used to do when we were kids.
Question 13. All right, what was one of your favorite things to do in OOB? Did you have a favorite thing to do in OOB now?
I like walking the beach, looking at those waves, looking at the pier and remembering the old days of all the things that were there, remembering them because they were all wonderful times. You can't ever forget wonderful times and happy times. and you see people that you know all your life. In a big city, you don't see that, do you? You might live next to your neighbor and never even talk to them. In Old Orchard, that's not the case.
Yeah, that reminds me of like I moved here this year, and like back in Saco, there was like I lived on this small dead end street, but like it would be hard to like tell you like one of my next door neighbors.
I know, honey. So
it's like
you're loving Old Orchard too. Maybe you'll stay here until you become a big businessman or whatever you want to do in life. You think so?
yeah.
Something about Old Orchard with me anyway is I love Old Orchard. I never want to leave Old Orchard. I can't, it's heaven for me.
Question 12. What made you want to stay in OOB as an adult? Did you feel the way that you wanted to stay there forever?
Yes, I did. I never had the desire to run away to another city and make things big because I was quite content with my surroundings, my parents, my sisters. I had a business when I was 15, and it was called the Boston Fruit Store, and that was on Old Orchard Street. It wasn't that it was only my business, but my dad kind of pushed us into that kind of thing. We had the building, and it was good for me to learn. And I had a gift shop named Maureen's Gift Shop, and that building is where the Bellboy restaurant is open today, and that became my sister's restaurant, the Bellboy, and it must have been 1967. And she ran it until she came stricken with Alzheimer's, and then they had to sell it to the current owners. But everything about Old Orchard was easy and kind. You could leave your doors open, and my mom and dad took my sister Bev, because the other two were older, to Florida every year from January until May 1st, when we had to come back to open the store. So there was no reason for me to seek anything, because I had the life of Riley, and I loved it as it was. I later became the town clerk in Old Orchard in 1981 election, and I stayed there until 2002 as town clerk. It was perfect for me because I knew everyone, I loved the job, I loved all the people there, and it makes me sound like I'm bragging, and I don't like to do that, but that was my life, being the town clerk in Old Orchard Beach. I was proud to represent my town.
Question 15. Did you ever see any bands that played at the ballpark? Any like big bands?
When the ballpark first opened, it was a ballpark. And we all, of course, I think Jerome Plant, who was our town manager, and he was responsible for bringing that AAA club here to Old Orchard. I think he said it was a holiday, and we closed our offices at noontime and half at noontime to go to the first game to see them play. And it was kind of a joke in town sometimes, because imagine closing the town hall to go to a game, because it was political around that time too, like it is in the world affairs, you know.
Did you see like AC/DC or?
No, I never went to any of the bands or anything like that, but you could hear them all over town. And my sister lived on, my sister Bev lived on Fern Park Avenue, which is abutting the ballpark. So if we wanted the music, we'd go up there and leave the windows open, and you could hear everything.
Okay, question 16. What was your favorite place to hang out in OOB and why? Is it still here?
We really didn't have places to hang out. When I was a kid, we'd go to our friends' houses, we'd play in the yards of houses. No, there was no hangout per se. we'd go sometimes to the clamshell restaurant. It's now that 64 Cafe.
64.
And it was, the post office was right next to that. But we weren't a hangout type kids. That wasn't part of our activity. Yeah, that wasn't part of activities for my age group anyway.
Question 17. Do you miss being a kid at all? Hanging out with all your friends and just doing anything as a kid?
That's kind of a question that I'm using sight because I've gotten older. You never can go back. So I don't miss what I had because now my interests are no longer that of a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 14-year-old. Now they're an 80-year-old. But I look back at every one of those days and times with a memory that makes a smile on my face. And that sounds kind of silly to say. How could anybody be smiling at every memory? Because I don't think we ever grew up when we were kids without happiness. So I'm thrilled that I had that kind of a life. I don't say I miss it because now my tastes in life are attuned to a person of my age. I don't know how else I can answer that question.
Alright, question 21. Were you on the beach when any planes landed? Like any famous...
No, that was in the 20s, I think. But we did have a special commemoration day. I believe the town Chamber of Commerce put it on, and they mimicked or they celebrated planes landing. Lindbergh landed on our beach before he made his overseas flight. And they brought in all those planes this one time, and the beach was packed, but it wasn't the originals, of course, and I wasn't around when the original planes did that, honey.
Question 24. What were restaurants like downtown? Did they have like different foods and like all sorts of foods?
Mm-hmm. There were a lot of restaurants in town because our population used to go from, we might have had a population of 2,000 people when I was a child, and in the summer months it would go up to 70,000. So people that were interested in using the town to make their money for the year would open restaurants because you'd need to have places for those people to eat at. And a lot of people didn't have transportation here and there, so when they came to visit from Canada, they'd stay for 2 weeks, but they'd stay in some of our beautiful hotels. Has anyone told you about the famous Old Orchard House that was on? That went from Saco Avenue all the way down through Memorial Park to Heath Street. I live across the street from there. And they had restaurants there. They had Jewish restaurants in town. They had all the hotels that people stayed in had their own restaurants for people to eat in, but you as a town person, you could go to them too. We had a bakery, Rice's Bakery it was a Jewish bakery because there was a large Jewish clientele my years in town. Let's see. Yeah, there was a little breakfast shop on Old Orchard. It was called Nick's Cafe. And they opened at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I heard tell one time that he had a couple hundred or 300 breakfasts a day. And he'd close after he had all those breakfasts. So he was only open in the morning. That's how many people were here to have breakfast. There's a history to it, that train and that name of that street that it came down by the police station. When I grew up, the town hall was right next to Well, the fire department was hosed in the town hall building in the back, where you go in now, that was the fire department. The police department was underneath because it was so small. We didn't need too much space in this town for crime and fires and things like that, except of course the massive fires, the downtown area and stuff. But the town hall did just about everything for us.
Alright, question 23. Did you ever go to any dances in the ballroom or the ballrooms?
No, because again, I was too young. And by the time I grew up, they were no longer in operation. There was, besides the pier, there was on West Grand Avenue, there was the Palace Ballroom. And those were all famous, honey. But again, we didn't go to them as kids because, and by the time we grew up, they were out of, we even had a movie theater called the New Theater down in Old Orchard Street, just before you went up onto the pier on that side of the street. We had a movie, not a movie house, a real playhouse. Do you know where Savoy Street is off of Old Orchard Street? You go down Old Orchard Street and you turn left and you come to where the American Legion is on Imperial Street. Well, on that short street right there was a theater, a real live theater. I miss all of those things now because I'm of an age where I'd like to go to a play instead of having to go to a gunquet. But they've been long, long gone. Why is something I can't answer.
There is some plays like in different like places.
Oh, there are, but this was right here in Old Orchard where
Like
we
where you
were.
could probably walk.
I could walk.
Do you wish like the world would go back on like things being cheaper, like the way you just described, like the squirrel candy going to be like 5 cents or like, you know.
Well, the thing is that the world has so many more people than it ever did. There are so many advances in all kinds of fields, sciences, and going to the moon, which no one ever would dream of in my day. We can't go back in time. We have to have progress. So you have to accept some of those things. There's lots of the things that they've progressed in that I wish they hadn't, but that's personal philosophies, and I don't understand something that I'm gonna say. Do you kids know how to write, or do you print?
What do you mean?
We
don't.
write, and like we write sometimes like if we are going, like we have handwritten, like say.
They call it cursive, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
we
can't.
don't
We
do
don't do
cursive.
cursive anymore. Like I heard my mom wishing that they did.
Yes, I wish it too,
Yeah, we don't do cursive, we just do.
but you need to do cursives, just like Kay said that I should like, other than pop music, I should like the old fashioned. You need to learn to write cursive.
Alright, question 20. Have you seen the dummy railroad and did you ever ride on it?
No.
The little trains that would go from Saco to
Oh,
Loranger.
on the Tifa Turn Road? No, honey, that was before my time. But there was some kind of history story that, I wish, Jerome probably is telling if they ask the same questions of the other folks that are here. Tifa Turn Road was the name of E. Emerson Cummings Boulevard. But they had a romantic story about somebody that they were courting each other, and when the train stopped, they used to say, when you get to that tree, you make a turn, and that's why they called it T for Turn Road, but I don't know the whole story.
Alright, question 19. Did you ever see the horse races at the Kite track?
I did, but I was too little to remember them. I think my dad might have taken me once or twice, but they were a big hit in Old Orchard too, the racetrack. It was way over on Milliken Street, not Milliken Street,
Walnut Street?
off Portland Avenue. When you went out Portland Avenue, it was on the right-hand side down a bit.
Walnut
Yes.
Street? I think it's called.
Well, Walnut was close to it, but it was where all the condos are now too, in the back.
Okay. Question 22. How did you spend your birthdays in OOB? Did you go anywhere special or?
No, I just celebrated my 80th birthday, and my nieces and nephews gave me a magnificent party that I have never seen the likes of, and I'm still thrilled. It was only on the 12th of May. But no, we didn't. Birthdays, that's a personal thing, the way you're brought up. My mother would say happy birthday, they'd sing happy birthday to you, but we never got presents or expected anything. It was just, they made a big celebration because they were, Mom and Dad, because they were happy that they had that child that was celebrating. But we didn't, our times were simple.
Did you get like a cake or anything?
You got a cake and a candle, and they sang happy birthday to you, and that was sufficient in those days. Even Christmas time. We had a stocking that was nothing like what you kids would want today, because, and I'm not saying that to think that anything strange, but we had a stocking that belonged to our father. Not a fancy Christmas stocking, and there'd be an apple in it, there'd be an orange in it. Your mom used to make pastries for the holidays, and those years they didn't crack the walnuts like they do today. You buy them in a bag and it's all chopped for you. My mother would have a hammer at the table, breaking up the walnuts, and whatever was left, she'd put a couple of walnuts in our Christmas stocking. And then it was during the war in the young days, they'd have like, I called them silver pennies. Of course they weren't silver because the dime was a silver. But they were made out of something that they again couldn't use the copper for the pennies because they needed all the metals for the war. And we'd get a couple of pennies and we'd be so excited because for a penny you could get a big bag of candy. The squirrels and the, what's the other ones they call it?
Chipmunks?
No, I mean, we used to have candy that was named squirrels. You'd get 2 for a penny. And now, if you can find the squirrel candies, they'd probably be 20 cents a piece. I don't know how much they are. A big Necco wavers used to cost 5 cents. And it was much longer than it is today.
So is there anything else you would like to share? Any like really good memories that you have that you wanna?
Everything I have is a memory at this stage. Every one of them. I truly, and this sounds fictitious, but I don't remember a bad memory. Maybe I don't want to, that could be, because life is short. When you get older, you realize that. And you look back at those times that might have been not so happy, but when you get older, you want to always be happy because things are going your way. So all I can say is I can't imagine anyone coming to Old Orchard Beach, living here, and having something bad to say about it. You love the town, you love the people in it. Politics will stop and leave that alone, but we have a lot of things to be proud and thankful for, and one of them is you kids. That's the attitude I like to have, so I find everything good.
Thank you for coming to Loranger answer questions we had about Old Orchard Beach.
Thank you very much.
You know something, it's a pleasure for me. I hope you'll give me a good rank, cause I don't wanna get a bad D on my report card.
Oh, trust me, you did.
You think I got, well, I'm gonna tell you, I think I like you kids, not thinking, I know I like you, I think you're smart, keep up the good work, and I will tell you, God will bless you and make you happy until a ripe old age.
Thank you.
I'm thrilled.
Thank you. We are students from the Loranger and we're here to interview you.
All right,
Our first question was, were you born in OOB?
I was. I was born February 2nd, 1930, which makes me very old.
Do you have any siblings?
I do. I'm from a very large family. My mother and father had 12 children, 6 boys and 6 girls. And it's more interesting than that because we were a perfect genetic split. You study genetics? Well, when you do, she had 6 brown-eyed children and 6 blue-eyed. And there were 3 boys and 3 girls, had the same coloring, the same characteristics.
Did they ever live in the town?
They all lived here until my brother moved to, my oldest, I'm the matriarch of the family now, there are 8 of us living. And my brother Norris moved to California and stayed there, and then I'm the second. And my brother Richard, who taught school for many years, he lives in Florida. And my sister Carol lives in Ocean Park. Beverly lives in Cape Elizabeth. My sister Sandra passed away. And then I had 4 brothers in a row. Bruce, William, Paul, and my sister Deborah. Oh, my brother Tom. And my brother Tom passed away. So out of our family, though, we have 7 teachers. So you can ask anything you want to know about teaching.
Okay.
I was a teacher also.
What was your child like in OOB?
Well, it was really fun. Old Orchard before the war was just a little seacoast village. And it was after I was born in 30 and the Depression ended around 39, 40, but we felt it. And nobody had a lot of money, very few people did. But we did simple things, like they might sound boring to you, but we played tag, we played ball, we went to the beach. You know, we made up our own games. Nobody skied, but we went down these hills. I don't know if you know, do you know where Fort Hill Avenue is?
Yeah. Yes.
St. Marie's Hill is what we called it. And we'd get on our piece of cardboard and go lickety-split down that hill, just stopping where the railroad tracks are. Our mothers did not approve, of course, but we did it. And what else did we do? In the summertime, we'd go to the beach. The beach was a big part of our lives. And it was a good time. It changed during the war. Well, I thought you might ask this question. And I think being on the beach, coming out of the water, and going up to where the hot sand was, and just rolling in the sand, and feeling that sun on my body. And then, after, my mother would come up and say, look at you, go get yourself washed off. And no matter how cold that water was, we had to go in and get every bit of dirt, of sand off us. So memories of the beach, and going out on the pier, eating French fries and frozen custard. There are many other memories, but will that suffice? Okay.
Question. You go to the OOB school system?
I did. I graduated from Old Orchard Beach High School, excuse me, in 1948. So I went to school. Are you familiar with School Street?
Yes.
Well, there was a school there, and that's where I was there until I went to the 7th grade. And this building wasn't here.
Question. First job at OOB.
Well, back then, you could work, there were no restrictions on age, and I worked at a place called Ruth's, hot dog stand on the end of the pier. And she specialized in hamburgers, hot dogs, but especially hamburgers. And she would put mustard and a slice of tomato and lettuce. And then after that, well, I started working when I was about 11 and a half. I was very young, but all of my friends did.
To share with us.
Well, I would like to share this because there aren't that many people alive today, I don't think, from Old Orchard who remember the war. And I do remember the war. I was 11 at the time of Pearl Harbor, and I remember it just seemed so unreal. We were aware of what was happening in Europe. We knew about Hitler. Do you read the parade section of the Portland Press Herald? Do you read newspapers?
Yes.
Sometimes, yep.
Well, on the parade section, during the war when Hitler was invading and the Blitzkrieg and all that, what they did is they put a square, there was a black mark all around the parade section, and it was done in sepia, which is like a brown tone, to show the seriousness of what was happening and what was happening in England. We were being bombed. We were very much aware of the war in Europe. And so when Pearl Harbor happened, the town changed immediately. It seemed like immediately to me. All of a sudden, or so it seemed, we had soldiers patrolling. We had a blackout. We had rationing. And we had, what questions would you like to ask me? Malachi, do you have a question? How about you, Jackson?
Nope.
Evan?
Was it scary when all the things changed in the town?
It's a very good question. This is how I felt, and I remember it distinctly. I wasn't afraid. It was scary, in answer to your question, but I wasn't afraid because this was my rationale. I thought, well, we have an ocean between us, right? And there's an ocean between the other ocean, the Pacific Ocean. But once we had the blackout and we knew that there were U-boats, submarines, German submarines in the Atlantic Ocean, then it got scary. Not that I thought about it all the time, but we were very patriotic. Do you feel that you're patriotic?
Sometimes.
Yep.
Well, we felt very blessed to live in the United States. And we didn't feel that anything, there was a sadness too, because young men were leaving. My father had 4 younger brothers in their early 20s, and they were in school and working, and they all joined the service. So for those 3 or 4 years, you didn't hear from them very often. And there were terrible battles, and I'm sure you'll study that sooner or later. So it was a time of coming together. We were very, very patriotic. We bought war bonds, but if we didn't have enough money to buy a war bond, you could buy stamps. And the bonds cost $18, and I think it was 75 cents, I can't remember. And then when they matured, they'd be worth $25. But we'd buy maybe 50-cent stamps. And we collected aluminum. We did all the things that we had to do. We had food rationing. You couldn't buy sugar, butter, or meat without a rationing stamp. That seems hard to believe, doesn't it? But let me think. the thing that bothered me the most was the fact that we had blackouts. So in the air raid warden, that's what they call them, men that patrolled up and down your street, would come to the house and they would knock on the door, scared the devil out of us. And he would say, "You have a light shining." And my mother would get all upset. And one of the kids would have pulled the curtain up, which was, so it was a different way of living. And then in the summertime, this is a little blurry to me, but I know that the soldiers patrolled the beach. So think if today you had soldiers patrolling the beach, and then in the summertime you could only go to an area that, as I recall, I lived on Atlantic Avenue, and there was barbed wire pushed in between like Old Orchard Avenue and down to the pier. So because at night, and you couldn't go to the beach at night. So what do you think about that?
Question 7.
Different way of living, like compared to now.
Well, it was a different way of living for a brief period of time, but I don't know how you feel about today in your life, but I felt very lucky because it was a small community and we had our friends. People were very active in community things, like the church, the churches, the schools, the fire department, the police department. They all came together and worked to make us feel better. And then we had the presence of the soldiers, so we didn't feel, but it was a mixed feeling.
Did you do any sports growing up?
I played basketball, and I was on the team. I wasn't very good. I was a guard, but it was fun.
Just any, like, events that happened in OOB?
Well, of course, I was there during the war, and I remember the Normandy invasion, BD Day. I remember the celebrating and how happy we all were. And then I remember BJ Day, which happened in August of 45. I was 15. But the thing I remember, and you kids probably have experienced a similar type of thing, we had terrible forest fires in 1947, and I worked for the phone company, and I can tell you that it was just a time of horror, because the skies got blue and orange and black, and there were sparks of, the fires hit the planes. Old Orchard wasn't hit, but there were a lot of it was a scary time. And you know about fires.
Yeah. Yes.
You know how the root system will catch on fire, and then there's no fire for a space, and then it will pop up. So farmers were up in arms, and they had their guns ready to take care of whoever was setting them. The thought was that the fires were being set, and it was mistaken.
What was your favorite place to hang out in OOB?
Well, at the drugstore. Old Orchard was very different from the way it is now. It was a pretty little community, a lot of trees, but when the war came and the shipyards were going full force, people came from all over the state to live, well, all around Scarborough, Biddeford, Saco, and in Old Orchard. And what they would do is live in summer cottages. They would winterize them. And there was a gentleman named Mr. Thorne, and he had a drugstore with booths. And we could hang out there. And I think hot chocolate was 10 cents. So after going to church on Sunday morning, this is very wicked to say, but sometimes we wouldn't put the money in the collection. We'd save it and go buy a hot chocolate. And I'll bet you kids do similar type things. No?
Do you miss being a kid?
Well, no, not really. I've enjoyed every different age I've been. And I think that you should wake up in the morning and be very happy you're here and enjoy the day. So I remember fondly. I have good memories. And that's important, to make good memories.
Do you witness any of the fires that happened in OOB?
I didn't witness them up close, but I could see it's as though the tower, it was closing in because the skies were just terrible. Yellow, orange, red, and smoky. It was, and you could smell the fire, that acrid smell that I'm sure you have all had the experience of smelling. And to this day, I can smell when the burning of wood, and then, you know, when it gets damp, you can still smell it.
Question. Look like when you were growing up.
Well, it was a lot longer than it is now. It was prettier. There weren't all the different booths and honky-tonk stuff. This is what I remember the nicest. I worked at the end of the pier. It was hot dog stand. And then we had, her husband John ran the French fry place. And the French fries pier fries were always good. But the best thing was the frozen custard. Do you like frozen custard?
I don't think I've ever had
You don't know
I
what it
don't
is?
think I've ever had it.
Okay, I'll tell you. It's like a thick, creamy ice cream. And it just, they had vanilla and chocolate. That was it. And it was delicious. And there's a frozen custard stand in New Gloucester where they use a very similar recipe. A lot of eggs and cream.
What was one of your favorite things to do in OOB?
Well, we had a roller skating rink, and I loved to go roller skating. And I wasn't very good at it, but it was fun. We all roller skated. It was very inexpensive. I don't even know if we paid, truth to tell. And in the summertime, we had the most beautiful roller coaster. And I like to go downtown in the summertime. And we were allowed to do this. I don't know how much money it cost back then, but not much. And the favorite things were the merry-go-round, the roller coaster, and we had this spooky house. I don't know what they called it. I can't remember. And it went, you know, when you're going onto the pier, well, there was a mirror that made you look fat or thin, depending upon how close you got or how far away. You can make your neck stretch way up. But right next to that was a tunnel, and it was just dark and spooky. And you walked through it and bumped into, I don't know what they called it. You'll have to look that up.
Okay.
Okay.
Question. Did you ever get to meet any someone who's like famous?
I did. Because I was a telephone operator, and Mr. Duffy, Howard, and his brother Willard, because it was Willard, owned the pier. And they had all the big name bands come. Louis Armstrong, Cab Calloway, Artie Shaw. And because I worked for the phone company, we got free passes to go out. And so I met all of those gentlemen. He would see to it that we met them. And of course we were shy. Never would say anything except duh or hello. But all the big stars went out to the pier. Are you familiar with Duke Ellington?
No.
Louis Armstrong?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I met them both.
What, like, have you ever gone to the ballpark here?
Once.
Once?
Just once. Well, you realize I left Old Orchard at 21, and that we didn't have a ballpark at that time. But I have been.
Did you meet any famous people there too?
No. I just watched a game.
Did you see Charles Lindbergh?
Well, I'm not quite that old.
Oh, okay.
No, but I do know my father's first cousin was the parish priest. I'll tell you a story, guys. And Father Mullen was on the beach. Let me get this story straight because it's, I'm sure it's recorded at the Harmon Museum. Back then, they had hot air balloons, okay? And this one balloon had come loose and it was drifting out to sea. Why, I'm off the subject of Charles Lindbergh, but I'm thinking about the beach because planes did land on the beach. I did witness that. But anyhow, my Father Mullen would be like my second cousin. He got his revolver and he shot down the balloon so that it wouldn't drift out to sea and save the people that were in it. But back to Lindbergh, all I can tell you is I know he landed on between Grand Beach and Old Orchard.
What was your favorite hobby to do?
Hobby?
Yeah.
I didn't really have hobbies. I mean, I read. We all read copiously. We all went to the library and got out books, and we had reading time, not only at school but at home. And we, I guess, would you call playing ball a hobby?
Yeah,
Sort of, yeah. I didn't knit, and I was terrible at home ec. I'm not very creative. I painted later in life, but I just had fun playing games, walking. We did a lot of walking. Not everyone had a bike, so we did a lot of walking, talking. We made up word games. Do you still do that? Not with your computers, probably.
No.
What's your favorite hobby?
My favorite hobby is probably playing baseball.
Oh, that's good. I could have told that you had on. How about you, Jackson?
My favorite hobby would definitely be, I think, going outside and just going outside, I guess.
Well, that's
Like-
good. Enjoying.
Yep.
Well, that's a great, everybody should enjoy the outside, even in the rain. How about you, Evan?
I like walking and running.
Yeah.
Two fun things.
Well, see, we did the same, you enjoyed the same things that I enjoyed. Getting out of the house, we did our chores on Saturday, and then we just met our friends, and away we'd go, sometimes to the beach. We'd walk, we'd sit in, we didn't have parks per se, but we'd just sit on a bench downtown and talk.
Did you play any instruments?
I didn't, no. I had 5 children, and they all took piano, and they all played instruments. We couldn't afford it. The lessons were, and we didn't have a piano. So when my children took piano lessons, I wanted to make sure I knew that they were practicing right, and I knew a little bit about music. So I took piano lessons when I was about 45, but I wasn't very good. But I did know when they were practicing.
Everybody good?
I'm happy.
What was it like for you to have a birthday?
Okay, this is when I'll tell you about my family. There were 12 children, and we weren't poor. Nobody that I knew played, went away to camp, skied like my kids did, had lessons in this and that. So there wasn't a lot of money to do things. So what was your question?
what was it like to have a birthday?
Oh, back to birthdays. So we didn't have parties like they do today. But my mother would leave us a note in the morning. It wasn't a card, but it would be a note about your birthday, okay? And then, depending upon whatever day it was good, we would have a birthday supper. And the only birthday party that I ever had was when I turned 13. And I had my girlfriends came. In fact, one of the girls, Marie Loranger, they named the school after. And we had, I can tell you what we had, you're gonna laugh, it was shrimp wiggle on toast. Do you know what that is?
Is it like toast with shrimp on it?
Yeah, and what would the shrimp be in? Kind of a sauce?
Jelly?
Yeah.
No, jelly, a white sauce. And you make this white sauce and put it on toast with shrimp in it. And then homemade tomato soup and shrimp wiggle on toast. And a big cake, and pardon me, and ice cream. And that was my 13th birthday party.
Question. Did you ever go to the ballroom?
Out on the pier?
Yeah.
Oh, very often. I didn't go to dance per se, and I never had a date out there. We didn't date till we were older. You know, like 18. Do you believe that?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, so when we'd go to the ballroom, say Louis Armstrong was playing, when you didn't dance, you just stood there and you just listened and you moved. So it was wonderful. You could feel the pier shake. You know that? Because they were all wooden, well, it was a steel pier at first, but with all that bouncing and music and people moving, the pier would move.
Question. Did you like do any fishing?
Well, not really. We'd go down to Ocean Park, you know where Ocean Park is,
Yes.
and there's a little bridge there, and we'd try to fish, but it wasn't really fishing. We'd get a pole and put a string on it and tie something. There was a big saltwater swimming pool in Ocean Park. So we'd go to the pool and then we'd fish, but I can't remember that we ever caught any.
Or did you ever draw? Like, did you like to draw?
I'm not a good drawer. That's not a proper way to say it. No, I did not draw. But in my older years, I painted. I did oil painting and I did landscapes. So that was, you didn't have to really know how to draw to do the kind of painting I did in watercolor, a hobby.
What was your favorite painting you made?
Well, I made, every place I lived, my husband would put in a rock garden for me. And I love rocks, and you just tuck the little flowers here and there and place the rocks where you want them to be. So after my husband died, he had put in the rock garden. So I painted it, and it's just a rock garden with all the favorite flowers. I put some in that obviously were not there, but it was a nice lesson.
Like, did you ever own a car?
No. In fact, my mom and dad never owned a car. And let me tell you why, because, well, for one thing, they couldn't afford it. And for the second thing is we lived at the top of Atlantic Avenue. And if you went up toward Saco Avenue or to Washington Avenue, there was a trolley car. Now, I rode the trolley. Have you ever been in a trolley car?
Yes.
Yeah. And they're fun, aren't they?
Oh yeah.
Well, we'd get on the trolley, it started at the foot of Old Orchard Avenue, and it would pick up passengers like at the top of Old Orchard Street, go on Saco Avenue, and then take a veer off to Washington, and it took you all the way to Biddeford, Saco, Biddeford. And then after the trolley was stopped, why they stopped it, bus, because we didn't have gas rationing. We had gas rationing during the war, and buses came into Holt. We took the bus, but it wasn't as much fun as the trolley.
Your favorite, like, thing in the orchard?
Favorite thing, favorite memory thing? I would have to think about that. Whenever I live in Saco now, and whenever I drive to Old Orchard, whether I go through Ocean Park or down Old Orchard Avenue on my way to Portland Avenue, I always look at the ocean, and it's beautiful, and I love it. And that's my favorite thing, is the ocean. and
Question.
beach.
Were you alive when World War II happened?
Remember I told you about
Yeah.
I was 11 when Pearl Harbor happened, okay? So my life changed, everybody's life changed. You became aware of, you had to, because the young men disappeared, they went off to war. People came from all over to work in the shipyards. We had a blackout. We became very close. We always knew everybody, you know. I lived in Old Orchard when in the wintertime you couldn't get away with anything, guys, because my aunt taught school, my father was a postman, my uncle was on the police force. I knew the parish priest was my father's first cousin, and my uncles, you know, not that you wanted to get away with anything, but I mean, you knew that whatever you did, people watched out for you. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
What was your favorite food in the orchard?
What do you think it was? Was it French fries or the French fries on the pier, or the frozen custard?
Custard.
Frozen custard.
Yeah, knew it.
Delicious.
Have you seen the Dummy Railroad?
The what?
Dummy Railroad? Something like that? It's what?
Can you spell that for me?
D-U-M-M-Y Railroad.
The Dummy Railroad.
Yeah.
I remember the railroad, and then the old railroad station. No, I don't think I know what you're talking about. Do you know the Dummy Railroad?
I've heard of it. Like,
Tell me about it.
Dummy Railroad, they call it that because they couldn't like curve and that stuff, so it just goes straight and then back. It goes two ways, so it'd go like this way, and then when it stopped and dropped everybody off, it'd go backwards.
That was after my time, or before my time, I don't know.
Did you ever get to see the kite race track?
Oh, the sulkies?
Where they took the horses and they raced with them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had a very famous racetrack in Scarborough. Well, we'd go Portland Avenue and get to they called them the sulkies. And my father would take me once in a blue moon, which means nothing else. And it was fun. Not like a racetrack. I don't know if the sulkies were in Scarborough, but I do remember going because they had like a little cart. Yeah.
Question for you.
Yourself?
Yeah, some of them.
Good, you've done a very good job.
Thank you. So when you were growing up and like you saw newer stuff come out, like the phone, did you like that stuff, or would you really didn't
When
like
what came out?
like newer stuff, like
When the technology got
Oh, the
better.
technology, okay. I'm glad you asked me that question, because of course, any advancement in science, technology, I think should be, or medicine, you name it, should be welcome. And I'm happy that today you have what you have in technology. My only objection to it is this. I think Malachi, when my grandchildren come to visit me, forget about what I think, but when they would come to visit me and they would have their iPhones and they would be looking at them, at first I thought, well, this is really quite marvelous, isn't it? And then I noticed that they didn't communicate. You know, they'd be talking and then they wouldn't be looking at me and they'd be looking down, and I thought, what are they doing? Now, I could have an iPhone if I want, but I use my computer, and I have a landline phone. Of course, I have a what do you call it?
flip phone?
Yeah, for safety and all that stuff. But now, after a while, it didn't dawn on me. I knew that if they came and they were constantly, I have 8 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, and they're constantly looking, we weren't communicating. So they would have to put it in a basket. And you know what? We have the greatest conversations. They're older now, some of them are. But am I happy with this? Yes, I am. And it's kind of fun when my daughter visits me and I want to know anything instead of my having to go to the computer. I'll just say to her, well, would you find out if Katie Tur has had her baby or who she's married to? This is a newscast and Katie Tur. And she just, gets it all there. And we laugh because it's instant knowledge. Now, when I was your age, where do you think I got my information?
Libraries?
Went to the library. And it was, it was a different world. I'm not sure that, I know it's better now because you have access to more information, but we'll have to wait and see what it does for people as people. Do you still communicate? Do you know how to write? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question: why?
Well, we didn't have a restaurant in Albany. When I was a kid, there were a couple of summer places, but I never went to them. So it's a moot question for me. We did go to Biddeford to the Wonder Bar and get a hamburger. But I live in Saco, and my favorite place to go is Rapid Ray's. You like that? It's a great place. I love their hot dogs and everything. And celery salt.
Question 3. Did you ever get to ride Noah's Ark? At Palace Playland?
Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was in Noah's Ark. But I'll tell you what, it was terrifying. I don't think they have it anymore. That was when you went up the slide and they dumped you off. Do you remember that? Do they have it now?
No.
I can't, I don't even remember. I went on it once, and that was it. But we had a beautiful roller coaster, twice the size of the one you have now. And I've been on the roller coaster in Coney Island, and it reminded me of that. But Noah's Ark,
Question 3. Did you ever see the Velvet Hotel?
the what?
Velvet Hotel.
The Velvet Hotel. Seems to me I would have, I don't remember a Velvet Hotel. What years we?
It's
It was the hotel that was like all velvet, like most stuff was made out of velvet, and it like burned down.
I remember the old Orchard House, you know, where Rite Aid is now.
Yeah.
Well, there was a big boarding house, and they had a ramp that went from where the front doors were down to the railroad the railroad station, and we would run pell-mell from the top down. It seemed like it was the end of the world, because I was only so big.
Question 3. Did you ever get to see planes land on the beach?
I did,
What was it?
and quite recently too. Maybe 3 years ago, they were landing in Grand Beach. Did you see them?
Yeah.
I saw that, but I saw them as a kid, but I can't remember, you know, it didn't excite me too much. And then remember that when I was old enough to be aware of things, it was during the war, and nothing landed on the beach during the war.
Question that changed.
Well, let me think about that. That changed. Well, walking out on the pier certainly has changed, but that wasn't my favorite thing. Maybe being at the beach as a kid and knowing everybody, and we all watched out for each other. And now when I go to the beach, on the old beach by Atlantic Avenue, I rarely see anybody I know. So that's changed. The whole town has changed.
Yeah.
It used to be a pretty little town, and it's never come back from the way it used to be.
Question sports.
I like sports, and my husband and I were out at the University of Michigan. I was at Eastern Michigan College in Ypsilanti, but you've heard of Big Ten. The Big Ten football conference. Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin. Well, anyhow, we were at the University of Michigan for 6 years, and we would see all the most famous football games that were played in the country. So back then, I was very interested in football, and I like to watch golf because I played golf as did my husband. Baseball, I love baseball.
Who's your favorite?
Well, the Red Sox.
Oh.
Who's your favorite?
Yankees.
You know, all my kids had a favorite team, and my daughter Kate, it was the Yankees, and what was that team? The Miami Dolphins.
Oh, that's Mr.
Yeah.
Chris. Yeah.
So I like sports, but I don't watch them as much as I did when my husband was alive.
Which is your favorite sports?
What?
What is your favorite sport?
My favorite sport would be baseball.
Question. Ever build something?
Build something.
Like anything? Like, did you ever get to make something?
Well, I've created paintings, but build something? No. I took pottery class, and I was terrible, so I gave it up. I didn't give it up because it wasn't anything, I mean, I just did it, so it is me. It wasn't part of a class or anything. And I discovered I had no talent whatsoever in pottery. But, no.
Did you have any pets when you were younger?
We had a dog, and a cat, and then we had so many children, we didn't have cats and dogs anymore. But we always had, my husband and I always had animals, cats and dogs. And one time a friend gave us a bantam rooster, and the rooster would wake everybody up, cock-a-doodle-doo in the morning. So that didn't last very long. We got rid of it. I got rid of it. I gave it back to the friend who'd given it to us. Not a nice gift.
No. Question. Did you ever go on vacation?
No, we didn't. Not when I was a young child. Where would we go? When you live in Old Orchard and you have that beautiful ocean, no, we never took a vacation. A few times we went to Boston on a train, but that was it.
Did you see any famous things that are famous?
I went to Fenway Park, saw baseball games a few times, and I saw plays, and that's about it. I realized I left Old Orchard
Yeah.
when I was a young
Yeah.
girl.
For college. What generation more than yours?
What is there about your generation that I like more, or like less, or how would I think of your generation? I think it's a wonderful age you're living in, and I think you guys have done a great job doing this. It makes me aware of the fact that you're hopefully thinking about the time you're living in and what you might do with your lives to make sure that the way of life that you have now stays. Are you happy? Do you guys listen to watch television? See, we listen to the radio and we read. So do you do it because you have to, or are you naturally curious and read books?
Curious. I don't have to do it, but I just do it.
What kind of books do you read?
I usually read graphic novels
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes sports books.
Well, that's good. How about you, Jackson?
Oh, sometimes usually read nonfiction, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Evan, do you read?
Yeah, I think reading's really fun. I usually read fantasy books because I think they're
You
fun.
really like fantasy? See, that's something I've never, maybe because we never read fantasy. Or maybe Alice in Wonderland or Gulliver's Travels. That was pretty fantastic.
Question 39.
You still do the same things. I mean, during our conversation, I've noticed that you still like the same things that we liked. You like to hang out, take walks, watch ball games. We listen to them. That's one thing you didn't ask me about. The radio. That was our means of getting the news. And I can tell you, I listened with my father on the front steps, and it was Joe Lewis and another fighter. And all the neighbors came down because not everybody, well, we had a big wide steps on the front porch. And the night of the fight, I just happened to be down. My dad let me come down, and we listened to the fight. Hi there.
Just checking up on you.
I'm asking them questions now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We're doing fine.
Okay.
Thank you. So the radio, to me, was like your iPads, or however, your computers. You could listen to music, but you listened to the news. Yeah, and you read. Do you kids still get current event papers, newspapers?
Sometimes, not often, once a week. Yeah, well, in class we do watch this thing called CNN 10. It talks about what's happening in the world and what's going on.
Well, this is good. And you like it?
Most of it. Sometimes it's more about what's happening between government and presidents and war and that stuff.
It's very important, though, that you know about it, and not just to know. Knowledge is power. And you want to keep abreast of what's happening in the world. Because someday you'll be voting. What do you think of that, Jackson?
Good.
You have to vote.
I know.
You got to know what you're voting about, right?
Yeah.
And why. Well,
question. There's something that's not like worth a lot of money, something like that. Like, say you had a gold nugget.
Mm-hmm. Did I ever have a gold nugget?
No, like, did you own something that cost a lot?
Well, let me put it this way. No, I didn't. But I don't know anybody who did. It was a different time that I lived in, a different era. We had things that, well, I remember when I graduated from high school, I got a string of pearls, and that was the most valuable thing I ever had. Up to that date, we never thought about things like that. Well, maybe we thought of it, and I just didn't. I don't remember, but I can tell you this, we had everything we seemed to need or want, and we were happy. I don't think that having things makes you happy. It's what you do and how you look at life that makes you happy, right?